Today, we're bringing you one of the most jaw-dropping family stories to come out of Korea. A heavily pregnant woman showed up at her father-in-law's funeral. Nobody knew who she was, but what she pulled out in front of the memorial portrait tore every secret this family had wide open. By the end of this story, you're going to be furious. Here's how it all began. We'll call our main character Eunseo. She was an ordinary housewife, 5 years into her marriage. Her husband, Jeongho, worked at a mid-sized company, and her father-in-law ran a small business out in the countryside. By all appearances, they had a perfectly comfortable life. At least, that's what Eunseo believed. But this is where the trouble started. One day, out of nowhere, they got a call that her father-in-law had collapsed. They rushed to the hospital, but his condition was critical. He held on for a few days, but ultimately, he passed away. Eunseo was heartbroken. But her husband Jeongho's reaction was strange. His face wasn't filled with grief, it was filled with anxiety. The funeral was arranged. Family, friends, and relatives began arriving one by one. Eunseo greeted the mourners as the eldest son's wife, doing her duty. Jeongho stood in his place as the firstborn, but he kept checking his phone obsessively. When Eunseo asked who was messaging him, he brushed it off. "Just work stuff," he said, and shut the conversation down. But his eyes were restless. It was the second night of the funeral. Most of the mourners had already left. Late that evening, a woman appeared at the entrance of the funeral hall. She was young, wearing a black dress with a belly that looked ready to deliver any day. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Nobody knew who she was. Eunseo assumed she was just another mourner paying respects. But this woman walked straight to the memorial portrait. She dropped to her knees in front of the portrait and began to weep, silently, but with her whole body shaking. Eunseo could feel that something was wrong. This wasn't the kind of sorrow a casual acquaintance would show. That's when she caught a glimpse of Jeongho's face. He had gone completely white. He looked like someone watching the one thing that should never happen. Eunseo turned to Jeongho and asked, "Who is that woman?" He couldn't answer. "I don't know," he stammered. "Probably one of Dad's acquaintances." But his voice was trembling. Then the woman slowly rose to her feet. She reached into her coat and pulled out a brown envelope. The air inside the funeral hall froze in an instant. The woman spoke. "I'm carrying this man's child." The entire room went dead silent. Eunseo couldn't believe what she just heard. This man? Was she talking about the deceased father-in-law? The relatives started murmuring in shock, and her mother-in-law's face turned to stone. Eunseo's mind was reeling. None of this made any sense. But here's where the real twist begins. Jeongho suddenly stepped forward. He shouted at the woman, "Don't do this here. Please, just leave." In that moment, Eunseo looked into Jeongho's eyes. That wasn't how you look at a stranger. The pieces in Eunseo's head started clicking into place. The woman opened the envelope. Inside were hospital ultrasound photos and medical records. And on those medical records, in the space labeled Guardian, the name written there wasn't the father-in-law's. It was Jeongho's, her husband's name, printed in plain black ink. Eunseo's legs gave out beneath her. The funeral hall descended into chaos. The relatives were horrified. Her mother-in-law collapsed to the floor, wailing. Jeongho stood frozen, unable to say a single word. Eunseo looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "Is this true?" Jeongho couldn't lift his head. That silence was his answer. What came out afterward was even more devastating. Jeongho had been seeing this woman since before the wedding. He never ended the relationship, even after getting married. And the only person who knew the truth was his father. The father-in-law had been covering for his son the entire time, even paying the woman hush money to keep her quiet. But once the father passed away, there was no one left to keep the secret buried. The moment the funeral ended, Eunseo packed her bags. Jeongho begged her to stay. "Just give me one chance," he pleaded. "I'll sort everything out." But Eunseo said only one thing. "When that woman was on her knees crying in front of your father's portrait, she put me on my knees too." Jeongho had nothing to say to that. A few months later, Eunseo finalized the divorce. With clear evidence of Jeongho's affair, the proceedings went in her favor. Jeongho, on the other hand, lost everything: his wife, his family's trust, and even his father's business, which fell apart amid bitter disputes with his siblings. The secret he tried so desperately to hide ended up swallowing his entire life the moment his father died. You can fake sincerity, but the truth always finds its way out. The scariest part of this story isn't the affair itself. It's that the deepest lie was being told to the person closest to him. The truth exploded in the most solemn place imaginable, a funeral hall. And it wasn't a punishment left behind by the dead, it was the consequence created by the living. What are your thoughts after hearing this story? Let us know in the comments. A like and a subscribe go a long way in helping us bring you more powerful stories like this. We'll be back with another one that'll send chills down your spine.